If you work in D2C and you use AI and you're wondering what the F is going on every week, this is your podcast, the AI-DTC-WTF-Podcast, your home for tactical tips, strategies, and ideas that you can implement right now into your AI workflows to make your brand or agency more money. Welcome to another episode of AI-DTC-WTF, and today we are talking about Fable, the Claude model being pulled down by the US government for reasons that maybe you know, maybe you don't know, and what happens to your AI stack when this model vanishes overnight. So I'm here with Thomas Moen, my homie from Norway, who is becoming an absolute legend in AI in Europe and in other places too. And just super excited to talk about this because I think it happened and then everyone was like, wait, what's happening with this? And then it just said on Claude, Fable's unavailable. And I think this creates a lot of interesting precedents, right? In terms of like models being pulled down. So, it was available for 3 days. That's how long Anthropic's
it was some
powerful model
great days,
lasted.
Andrew. I had I was so happy.
Everybody had a lot of memes about it being a summer fling, a hot summer fling, right?
Yeah.
So look, like that's how long it was available for 3 days before the US government made them shut it off. And if you have anything that's wired into Fable 5 in those 3 days, right? This episode is your fire drill. We're going to go through what happened, what to do about it, and what are the things you need to check because I think there's a lot of pieces that we want to go through. So first of all, what actually happened? Let's talk about this. So on June 12th, actually it was at 5:21 Eastern, Anthropic received an export control directive from the US government saying, hey, you need to suspend access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5, two of its most capable models, 3 days after launch. The order targeted technically access by any foreign national inside or outside of the US, including Anthropic's own foreign national employees, because Anthropic couldn't cleanly segment access by nationality, and net effect was a full shutoff for all customers. And they did this because there was national security concern around a jailbreak of Fable, basically asking the model to read a code base and spot software flaws. And so, other softwares can already do this, but it was a jailbreak of Fable. But this, is sort of, this could happen to anybody. This could happen to any model. And in fact, it probably already has, and I'm going to go into the final point, which is Anthropic so they complied, but they publicly disagreed, saying that it was a misunderstanding. So nobody got hacked, nobody had a breach of data, but it was like recalled like a car part, right? Like, or whatever. So mid-deployment.
Yeah. And it's still unclear what the jailbreak or the security issues are. And it's been a lot of back and forth on things. And I think it's also particularly interesting that before the release of Fable 5 and Mythos, Anthropic has been spending a lot of time kind of hyping how dangerous the Mythos model was and kind of how potentially it would break the internet. And then when they finally kind of release it, it only kind of survives 3 days before it gets shut down. But no hacking, no breaching of data, and probably it's a mix of something you can recreate on the other models. And I also personally think it has a lot to do with the relationship of Anthropic and the US government as well, which I don't think we need to go into all that kind of the rabbit hole there, but it's definitely a mix with a lot of factors here.
Totally. But I mean, we should go into it a little bit. Like, I think it's a couple things to mention. One is that I think, I used to be a press secretary in Congress in the United States. And one of the things I noticed in being in Congress was that there was a lot of people that wrote legislation that wanted to actually think about things long term. And then there was the actual members of Congress that wanted things done yesterday. And it wasn't necessarily thoughtful at all around like the approach. Okay. And I think that we now in the current administration in the United States, people can disagree with me politically, but like it's a technical term would be, I think it's a little bit of an F show of like what actually is the strategy around AI. A lot of things are an F show, but we're specifically talking about AI today. And how are we going to go forth on this? And I think because it's rapid pace, it just doesn't match up with how government works. And so they don't know how to legislate or regulate this at all. And so to me, what happened was some idiot who's running the NSA at this point, right, in the United States, basically goes and says, and they see an issue and they go, oh my gosh, there's this issue. It's exposing stuff we didn't know. Oh my gosh, that's big. We should shut it down. I mean, like, it was 3 days. Like these models have been able to do this. And for specifically, they like went to Anthropic, I think partially from a PR standpoint to say like, we're reining in AI, but I don't think it really did anything because it's not really solving the core problem. And I think it also shows the dysfunction and the disorganization around how they're going to approach AI as an administration. But I also think it sets like a dangerous precedent that like a government can take down a model, right? Like that's a
Yes.
problem that it can take down a frontier model post-launch.
And the ramifications,
that's not great.
which I'm seeing, Andrew, kind of from my side, is that a lot of people are now very skeptical in kind of going deep with the American models, right? So I have a lot of friends who've been starting to experiment with DeepSeek. I have a lot of European friends who are kind of trying to understand the European language model landscape, et cetera, et cetera. So things that you wouldn't really think about a week and a half ago are now on people's minds, and people are a bit more aware of how unstable the current situation is in the US.
Absolutely. I mean, and the irony thing of this, I think, is funny, is that Anthropic's own safety transparency like area or division publicly admitting that no model is perfectly jailbreak proof. I think that handed the like regulators or the government the rationale that they needed, right? So I think it could have been anybody, and I think that's a big thing to point out. And who knows how this is going to continue to evolve, because we're at that phase where AI is only continuing to get more powerful as time goes on, and it will get exponentially more powerful. And so what is the government going to do to attempt to regulate this? And shutting down a model is not like a way to do it, in my opinion. There's going to have to be, basically an industry leading group that's going to go through and review these things, and then there probably is going to be a committee in Congress on this. There probably is, but it's not necessarily that effective at this point, because now it's June, July, August. They're not doing anything in Congress, and so the presidency, they're not the executive branch. They don't know necessarily how to deal with this, and so I think what you see things starting to pop up, like the New York law, which came out in June 9th, where you have to put a disclosure on your ad creative that says, hey, this is made with AI. There's a similar law that's actually in the European Union that talks about this. And the European Union one is classically European. It's like insanely broad, covers everything. It has no, like regulation arm, it appears. The fines are like, who knows? It's like,
Yeah,
there's no enforcement arm, rather. And it's
fair.
like, it's a mess. But I guess my point is that you're going to have all this stuff start to percolate in terms of you're having top-down people pulling models from the executive branch in the United States. You have bottom-up people pulling, like laws in New York State, and it's like all this stuff's going to start to do this. So over the next year, especially, I mean, you're going to have to be ready that you can't be overly dependent upon only one model.
Yeah, and
right?
this
Like,
kind of
that's
leads
AI-DTC-WTF is brought to you by Motion. And this episode is brought to you by Runneth from Motion. And if you run paid social, I mean, obviously, Motion. It's a creative analytics platform that everybody uses. But the thing I've been obsessed with lately is Runneth. And it's their AI agent that lives right inside of your ad data. The simplest way to explain it, most people use AI by asking it one thing, like, hey, what did we do yesterday? How'd it go? Runneth is the upgrade of that. You just tag it and ask it to do almost anything. It goes into your account, does it, like, build me this week's creative recap, pull the data and write a brief on what to iterate next, tell me which ads to make next. And it goes on and does this in plain English. So two things that actually make it really special, right? So under the hood, it's Claude, right? And anything Claude can do, Runneth can do basically even better as long as you give it access. And second, it's wired from everything Motion has. So the AI tags, the creative, the frame by frame breakdowns, and then it's trained by $14 billion in ad spend on Motion's customers, right? So it's pretty insane. So the way that, we're using it, and I know some other colleagues are using it, like I looked at what they're doing and we talked through it. Like, people are, having it drop a morning brief in Slack on how the account's performing. It gets smarter every time it runs. It's less like a tool and more like a creative strategist working while you sleep. So go see it at motionapp.com. That's Runneth from Motion, and make ads that win without getting lucky.
you're going to have to be ready that you can't be overly dependent upon only one model.
Yeah, and
right?
this
Like
kind of
that's
leads us
going to
into
be
why. Yeah, this leads us into kind of why you, the audience, should care about this. Why do e-commerce advertisers, agencies, D2C people, why should we care about this? But because I think we should care deeply about this, and I think it has kind of exposed how vulnerable a lot of people's AI workflows and kind of how they look at things and how they kind of build things and what kind of building blocks they've been using that suddenly maybe doesn't feel so future-proofed anymore.
No, absolutely not. So, why should you care? Let's go through some of the reasons. Number one, single model dependency is now a real risk for you. So if you're building stuff, creative analysis, ad copy analysis, competitor analysis, whatever, customer support workflow, anything you're doing in D2C by one specific model, a directive like this can take you down with zero warning. You're not going to have anything backup. So it's the same exposure as if you had one 3PL, or one ad platform. Like you have to be cautious and aware of this. I'm not saying, if Fable is what you eventually go with, that's the most powerful. I think that's okay. You just have to have a backup, which we'll get into in a minute. I think that's one. I think number two, agencies feel it harder than brands. If you ran 70 clients through a pipeline of static image creation, that's 70 fires you have to deal with, basically. So like agencies are going to feel this because the numbers and the scale that you're doing generally are going to be, greater than that of, let's just say, one particular brand. So just be aware of where you're tied in. And, having a plan of, if we talked about this in previous episodes, I talked about this with Will about AI governance. Who's running AI governance in your organization? And what's the workflow as it relates to what are we doing with AI? How are we using it? Where is it currently integrated? Where is it currently integrated into client deliverable and client communication and client, asset creation, whatever? And what happens if one of these models goes down?
Absolutely.
What's the plan? And you have to have somebody in your organization that's the captain of that really understands and has backup plans for it, because it's going to be really challenging if you don't have them.
Absolutely. And just to kind of build on the single model dependency we talked about, I also see that a lot of people are locking themselves into Codex or Claude Code or something like that. And, it is, I think when you're operating a business, you're very vulnerable so one thing is the models, but it's also kind of the platforms to make sure that your workflows would work just as good with Codex or some other large language models. A lot of people we've been talking to, Andrew, are kind of building their own software and are plugging the models into it instead of working kind of in Claude Code all day, etc. And I think that that's a very smart way of thinking about how to operate a business that makes you less vulnerable when things like this happen. So kind of be not platform dependent, I think it would be something you should think about going forward.
Yeah, totally. I think being not platform dependent and having a fail safe going through. Another thing to mention, right, is if you handle customer order data, so, we call that like the PII stuff, right? Which is around customer payments through Stripe or through Shopify or whatever else. One thing that I noticed in doing the research for this episode is there's a 30-day customer retention policy that was shipped with Fable.
Yes.
And this is their own jailbreak mitigation sort of trade-off. And D2C brands handling that data, that customer data, that changes by model. So you have to be aware of how that changes and what the changes are within each model. And you can just figure that out by asking the model, hey, how are you handling this? But, I think that is something to be aware of with customer data, right? And how you're protecting that. And if you were to run into an issue, with a customer saying, how's my data being handled or whatever, you have to be able to answer that. So that's, I think, some of the bigger pieces that we want to talk about why you should care. I'd say that let's get into sort of a little bit more of the tactics around this, which we've gone into briefly, but I think we get into more. So one, audit the AI dependencies that you have, right? Get your prompts, your workflows, your MCP configs, zaps, whatever, and make a list of who how they're connected and what is calling what. And like, again, this is sort of that AI governance piece within your organization. Have somebody assigned to this, or have a team in your agency or your brand assigned to this, of how are we doing this, who's in charge, and how are all these pieces talking to each other, so that if one breaks, there's a workflow that it can go on to a varying model and you're not completely stuck.
Also, I think it's important to build a fallback ladder, so for all the critical workflows, etc., make sure you have fallbacks and you have backup models and actually test the backup models. I had a big issue actually a few days ago where my backup model was not working correctly on one of my open clause. So suddenly everything stopped working. So actually testing that the fallbacks are working, I think, is very important. Make sure that your model is not hard coded into your workflows, but kind of make it to Opus or Sonnet or GPT or like whatever it is, I think is also very, very smart.
Yeah, I think ultimately another thing along with having this like pathway is also, keeping a playbook for manual mode, right? Like if none of this existed, like
Yeah.
what are the things that what are the things that you're going to do to fix this, and how are you going to run the business? So having a plan with the team, understanding if we cannot query this, what is the way that we're going through and doing this? We're doing this in our organization now, which is, looking at essentially with a database of all of our customers, we've done it manually, and now we are basically having duplicative efforts where we're updating it manually, but we're also updating it in AI as we continue to build AI, and we're building like a master queryable database within all of our customers, what they've done. But I'm worried that a model will get pulled down, or there's going to be some issue or whatever, and then so that's what we're doing. We're basically building two as it goes through so that we have a fallback. I'm not saying you have to do this, but I do think that if we ultimately move into one that's fully AI automated stuff that we're doing with customer database querying and everything, we should at a minimum at a weekly basis be also updating a manual database in Google Sheets or whatever that's locked so that we know, right? Like, I just think if we become overly dependent on this is bad. There's already so much talk around people are becoming lazy. They're not doing the work themselves. AI is doing it. You can tell all the posts sound the same. They're all sound homogenous, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said for that, because people jump into like making it easier on them. And I mean, LinkedIn comments are an example of this right now. So anyway, so you need to just like be aware and be conscious of that and have a plan.
Yeah, and I think building on that, I think you need at the minimum to understand the logic of how things work, right? So you have to understand what the AI is actually reading from, what it's going through, the processes it's doing. We've gone from SOPs to AI skills, basically. And those skills are getting more and more bloated and more complicated. I've actually started now going through a lot of my core skills and rewriting it from the bloat that AI wrote it into something that I can actually understand and understand the logic of. That has created actually a higher quality of the outcome. But also, if you have to go to what you call manual mode or caveman, like how you did it from back in the days, understanding the logic, the workflows, and what the skills that SOPs are actually doing is super, super important. And last thing that I'm becoming a bigger and bigger advocate for is also considering more open source systems, right? So I'm a big OpenClaw, for example, guy, which is an open source project you can put into every different large language models out there. So we're trying to build as much as possible outside Codex and outside Claude Code, and just let kind of our systems use them when we need it. But we are also now experimenting with having local models running or doing some of the work. So again, experimenting with what if OpenAI or Anthropic went off the map today? How screwed would you be? And what's the plan to make sure that you can actually keep thriving and at least kind of keep surviving in a blip like that?
Totally. I think the big thing to take away from this is that, look, AI is moving from, hey, this is doing cool shit. It does all this, to it's going to continue to move into pseudo regulated infrastructure. Okay. So you have to be ready that government's going to come in and playing a heavy hand. this. And I think anybody that's going to be in office is going to continue to try to do this, because I think the public sentiment around AI is we like it, we use it, but there's also a ton of skepticism in the United States. And people also, it's easy to be against AI, right? And it's easy to say like AI, they're too powerful, these companies, whatever, which I don't disagree with necessarily, right? So you're going to start to see that. You're going to start to see more laws like New York, where there's regulated infrastructure that comes up, or regulating the infrastructure of disclosures around AI, around, whatever. It's like we need to be ready, and there needs to be systems that you have in place, knowing that these things could be eliminated quickly. Okay. So again, like, it's contingency planning. It's easy to go all in on this stuff, but you also have to be ready and have a plan for when it's not. So thanks for
Absolutely.
checking out our quick episode today on this. We thought it was important to drop. If you have thoughts, questions, please feel free to email us or contact us, and we look forward to having you join us the next time.